Well, hi, folks. Meteorologist Michael Wilhite here with SouthernIndianaWeather.com. Thanks for clicking on here and watching the final winter forecast. The first winter forecast, my preliminary one, was issued back at the end of September. It is now the end of November. I had promised this out on December the 1st. I'm a few days early here, but I've got everything ready to go. So, why wait around when you've got everything ready to go here? So let's dive right in. This will be some new data. There's going to be some changes to the forecast made as you get later on into the video. I'm going to detail some of those changes. The analog years have changed because the ocean setup has changed. So, what has changed? Well, first off, let's talk about good old La Nina, our friend. Remember that La Nina is broken down into different regions, primarily Nino 3.4, which is the region out in here that you see in the yellow circle that I've put on here. That's what this index 4 is. And again, La Nina starts at this blue line that I've shaded on, a ½ degree Celsius below. And what you're looking at here is the daily temperature anomalies since mid-August. Right here at the green arrow that I put on, this was the value at the preliminary winter forecast that are released on September 29th. And you can see, well, at that time, we were pretty much sort of hovering right here around neutral category. Now, here's where we are now, and we are firmly in the El Nino, and in the La Nina, and we've actually been reasonably firmly in there for a good little while. In fact, we're no longer under a La Nina advisory. We are actually under a La Nina watch. We are now under a La Nina advisory. La Nina has started to take hold. But it is actually stronger as you get out into this Nino 1+2 region, and that's going to be really important for a number of reasons as we get into this. First off, again, we didn't talk about the 1+2 region last time, but this is the value where it was there, and you can see we've been firmly in a La Nina in that region for a pretty good long time. You see that there's a slight spike in the data here today. I'm not really worried about that spike in the data. That's really that's going to go back down. I'm not doubting that at all. But what you see here is, let's look at this. We've been we've been down to a -2.0 at times in here. There's some very cold waters that's down in there, and well, let's look at it visually. Why does that matter? Because the source region, the placement, if you will, rather, of this cold water is really going to be important to what happens here temperature-wise in the United States. So here's what the temperature looked back in the oceans, sea surface temperatures there on September 29th when the preliminary forecast was issued. Here's what they are today, and I placed a screenshot of that. So November 21st as I'm recording this, and the first thing that you notice is it's much cooler. As I go down in here, let me just sort of kind of draw on this for you. Notice first off that this region right down in here, the temperatures have way expanded versus what you see down here. So the cold waters certainly have expanded on there, and everything in general has cooled down here in the basin as well. It's gotten much colder. So La Nina has firmly taken a cold here, but what you really see here is that La Nina right now is what we would call an east-based La Nina. An east-based La Nina is basically whenever you see the coldest temperature anomalies sort of fitting over here off the coast of South America. That's what an east-based La Nina is versus a west-based would have the coldest anomalies over here. Usually it's one or the other. Most of the time it's really basin-wide, but usually one or the other has the colder anomalies. But whenever one is really lopsided, that can affect things. And what you see is that La Nina, it's firmly entrenched out here, but you've got the mass of cold waters out here. And that's going to affect things because what happens is whenever you get these colder waters out here off the coast of South America, rather than having the coldest waters out here, that can actually affect the position of the southeastern ridge. La Ninas tend to promote a ridge of high pressure, usually in the southeast United States, and that can really mess with temperatures. And sort of Indiana, where I forecast for here, is oftentimes on the borderline of that ridge. But the southeast corner of the United States usually gets toasty during the winter as a result of that. What you see, though, is that the average position of that ridge changes and migrates further west. And so you get places out and towards Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico that end up with that average position of the southeast ridge whenever you do see that develop, whenever you get an east-based La Nina. And that allows the eastern side of the United States to cool down a little bit more. We'll talk about that when we get into the analogs. I'll show you that visually in the analogs a little bit more, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense. While we're on the ocean temperature maps, I also want to mention the famous warm blob is looking like it could try to be back. The warm blob is the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. If you remember remember the brutal winters that we had back in 13-14 and 14-15? The first of those was really the worst of the two, but the second one was kind of bad too. If you remember those really cold winters that we had, they were a direct result of, first off, we didn't have any INSO down here. It was La Nada. It was just neutral. So there was a mix of warm and cool waters, and it wasn't lopsided to being El Nino or La Nina, either one. And what we had those years is we had the extremely warm water temperatures up here. It was this warm blob. And what happens is you get these warm water temperatures, and this can help to promote a ridge of high pressure here. And so that when the jet stream comes over this, the jet stream sort of ejects out of here. It has to move up over this ridge, and then it sort of goes down in here like this. And so that allows a good chunk of the country to be in the deep freeze. And if you get a ridge of high pressure up here with some blocking action as well, then you can have the jet stream configured something like that. And that, gives a good chunk of the country here a pretty rough winter as a result of that. So if this warm blob is really developing, that's something we're going to have to watch. This is where the warm blob, where we stood on the temperatures back in September 29th when it was issued. Notice the cool pool of water here, and notice how that cool pool of water has now eroded away. So things are certainly much warmer here. You've got a little bit of some warm water, cooler water scattered here in between, and you did here too, but by and large, everything on the whole has warmed. Now, go back and compare it this time last year, because you remember last year it was the winter that just wasn't. We had we just had a winter that wasn't meant to be. We had a La Nina that was trying down here, but this La Nina that was trying down here at that time just never really took hold, and it faded out and fizzled the later we got in here. So this was from November the 1st last year, and look at this kind of pool of cool water that you see down here in this, and notice where we're at today. You don't see that. So we're much warmer in the ocean temperatures up here in the Gulf of Alaska than we were last year, and we're much cooler down here as well, because just think about all of these cool waters that you see off the coast of South America. Well, that was warm waters last year. So the ocean setup this year is much different than last year, and so as a result of that, you can expect that the winter that we're going to see is probably going to be much different than last year as well. Another couple of things that we need to talk about too. First off, the Arctic Oscillation. The Arctic Oscillation is basically cold air on the move from Canada available to come down to us. And when the Arctic Oscillation is in the negative phase, then you can get some cold weather come down in here. And well, just sort of take a look where we have been here, and you see that, as of the 21st of November, whenever I'm recording this, we're firmly in the negative. It's forecast to trend back to positive, but this is all ensemble data, and each of these members shows a wide spread in the data that it could end up staying negative out here. There are only a handful up here in the positive with this. By and large, it's been mostly negative down here for the past little bit on this. Now, if this stays negative on a continuous basis throughout the winter, this is really going to be something to reckon with. Also, then NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, when it's negative, that sends a blocking up around Greenland. And that blocking around Greenland helps to force that cold air from Canada to come down in. And one of the reasons that we are much colder now in this November than we were last November is because we have been negative for a while. And if you look at the forecast is to keep that NAO pretty much in the negative state as we get into at least the first part of December here. So that means that there's going to remain some blocking around. The question is are we going to see that negative trend in these as we go into the wintertime? Unfortunately, that's not something that can be accurately predicted more than a couple of weeks out. So we'll have to see. But if we see that blocking, and there are indications that I think we're going to see a negative NAO and a negative AO a fair amount this winter. That's going to be much different than we saw last winter. Let me show you why. So what you've got here from the CPC, this is some research the Climate Prediction Center did. And basically what you've got here is you're comparing the phases of the NAO and the AO, and you are comparing it with, reconciling it with La Nina, La Nada, which is neutral, and El Nino. You can ignore these right now. La Nina is where we're at right now, so we'll look at that first column. Well, think about right now, we are in a firmly negative in both of these, and so this is the temperature pattern that we typically see with that. And the temperature pattern is that we typically see some cold up here in the northern tier of the states. The warm is confined well to the south, and the rest of us up in here sort of stay not bitterly cold, but certainly seasonable. And as we get later on into the winter season, when the average temperatures come down, seasonable can still mean snow with that. On the other hand, whenever we are in a sort of a neutral phase with that, that's when we tend to bake on the east side of the United States, and the positive side of both of those does the same thing under a La Nina. So what does that mean for us? Well, right now we are in this, and that actually lines up pretty well with the temperature anomalies that we are seeing so far in November. If this continues on, where we see a negative AO and a negative NAO, then we could be looking at certainly a much colder winter than we saw last year. All right, so let's talk about that, because that means I had to change the analogs. With this being more of an east-based Nina, I had to go back and take a look at years that favored more of that. I also looked at some years that favored that blocking up in the Gulf of Alaska there as well. And so whenever you looked at some of these years, here's what the 500 millibar height anomalies looked like. And let me break this down for you. So basically what you see here in these warm phases here is this is a huge ridge of high pressure here. You also have blocking going on over Greenland. That's a huge ridge of high pressure over here. And then you have a ridge of high pressure here, and notice this would be your southeast ridge under the La Nina. Oftentimes that's developed over here, but what we see is more of a trough, and that has been forced more to the west because of that east-based La Nina. What would that do to the jet stream then? Well, you got your jet stream sort of coming out here like this. What happens is it goes over that ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, and then you've got troughing going on over here, and so it kind of sort of comes down like this. You've got that ridge over here, so it's got to kind of go up and over that ridge, and it's got to sort of go over this as well before it goes out sort of like this, is what you would see with a pattern in the jet stream based off of this map. And so that would put an active storm track here, really, I would say, if this is an average position that we can expect, an average storm track right here off of the west coast. So you've probably got some active clipper systems that could come in here. With this as well, it depends on how far this jet stream buckles. All right, so if the jet stream starts to buckle down more like this, then certainly you could get lows forming up in here and taking an active storm track right through the Ohio and Tennessee valleys there as well. So there's some big implications to these analogs, and that blocking pattern here is very key with having that block out here into the Gulf of Alaska. This has actually got it more into the Bering Sea, so we'll have to see where that ends up developing. The position of that will help to determine, if we get a position developed over in here, then what you're going to see is more of a jet that sort of looks like this. If, on the other hand, what you see is this sort of a thing going on, then you may end up with a jet that looks more like that. And so the position of the trough down in here, and therefore who gets the coldest temperature anomalies this winter, really going to be determined in large part by what that water does over in the Gulf of Alaska. So that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Either way, I think it looks certainly colder compared to what we saw last winter. So let's talk then about our old analogs from September. The old analogs from September looked like this. That southeast ridge was really playing havoc down there, but if you compare it to the new analogs, notice now that the core of that warmth has shifted out to the west, and so you have what you see sort of going on right now, where you have the coldest of the temperatures sort of confined up to the northern tier of the country here, with those warmer temperatures out to the west, and then you have seasonable temperatures, everything in the white. Well, let's talk about what that would do. Let's dial that in a little bit here into some snow totals. I forecast primarily for southern Indiana. I know many of you on YouTube watch this, so bear with me for just a minute. Evansville, Indiana is a pretty major city around here, so let's talk about the analog years that I've just stated and what did it snow. And what you saw is 3 years below normal and 3 years above normal. So it sort of split 50-50 on snow here. But you notice that when it did snow, 2 of them were big snow years. And we might be tempted to say, oh, that was way back there. One of them certainly was, but one of them was 95, 96 as well. So, and grant you had some pretty decent sized storms that year. 10, 11, well, you still went above normal. Normal is 12.1 inches. There's 15.5 inches. But even on these lower years, that was more than last year. We had about an inch last year. It was pathetic around here. 4.4 is the lowest. So I do believe that what we see this year is a signal for more snow than we saw last winter, at least. That's a good thing if you're a snow lover. Could this be a big year? I'm still a little bit more reserved about that, but certainly what you see here is the potential for that. So let's dial it into the specific winter forecast then. Here's the national map, and you'll notice if you watched the preliminary winter forecast, there are some changes here. I had below normal temperatures over a large tier over here, but it was sort of in the previous winter forecast, it was sort of cut off up to here. Because of the change that you saw here, I have added some below normal temperature anomalies up around here. I'm not ready to dive that quite further south just yet. All right. I have backed off of the extreme warmth down in here and push that a little bit further out to the west. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give equal chances here for southern Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee valleys, and even on up to the board. So that's at least a cooler look than what the preliminary winter forecast was. I'm not ready to go out all cold because I still think there are concerns here that all out cold may not happen. But certainly the chances are greater now with that east base Nina than they were. As far as precipitation, still think we're looking at above normal precipitation over a good chunk of the country. Think you're looking at probably an active storm track here. Because again, once you get the ridge over here and the jet stream sort of buckling like this and then coming back up, you get lows that can form right here and sort of eject up here along that jet stream and sort of take that active storm track right through the Ohio Valley, possibly even right through the Tennessee Valley at times. I also think that with the jet coming in and screaming off, I think it'll vary over the winter, but I think you're going to see a track coming in like this before it buckles down and comes up. And I think because of that active storm track, you're really going to see some well above normal precipitation here out to the west with the below normal down in the southern tier again. If you look at snow, again, here's where I think your above normal snow is going to be pretty much up to our north here. I'm not ready to squeeze that down further south. What happens if we get a little bit colder winter than what I am forecasting? Well, if we get a little colder winter than what I'm forecasting, I could easily see places like this being added into the above normal snow. I really could. I'm not ready to go there. I'm not comfortable because I'm not confident in that yet. But I do think that is certainly possible if the AO and the NAO can stay negative more in the long term. That's a real possibility there. That's why for now I've given it equal chances. All right. Again, below normal there down to the south where it's a little bit warmer. And let me just sort of go back up here and say I do think there's going to be a pretty active lake effect snow season, which is partly why you see the well above normal up here as well, at least for part of that. Southern Indiana, let me give you some highlights here. Again, there's some normals for around the area. This is kind of what I'm thinking for us in southern Indiana. Pretty much equal chances of above or below normal temperatures. We're going to be right on that battle line. I think, frankly, with the storm track coming through, we're probably going to be on the battleground. I think there's some chances that we could see an increased risk of some icing events this year. Really believe that. I think that we're going to see some snow. I think we're going to see more snow than last winter, so that's a good thing. But I think it's equal of chances of above or below normal snowfall. Whenever you got 6 analogs and 3 are above normal and 3 are below normal, well, you got the potential there to be way above normal. You got the potential to be way below normal too. Sort of split the differences and go equal chances. Right now, 75 to 125% of snow totals is sort of what I'm favoring for our area. And I really, again, say equal chances then of being above or below. But I'll take that over last winter as a snow lover because that's way better than the inch or two that we had around here last winter. I do think we're going to see above normal rainfall again. Big takeaway from this, colder than last winter. All right, I think we're actually going to have a winter this year. I think there will be some times when the polar vortex splits and comes back down, and we will see those Arctic air invasions sort of coming through. All right, if I go back up here just on this really quickly, let me go back up, and I got to get here. There it is. All right, look by the way on the analog what we had. Because you had the ridge of high pressure over here and because you had this, that sort of allowed a trough to sort of come down like this, and what you have here is sort of the ridge bridge going on, where you got Siberian air crossing cross-polar flow going on down here into the United States, at least into part of it. I think there are some chances that we will see indeed of that this particular winter. So there's some chances that we could have some cold. I really think there's going to be some wild temperature swings. We've already seen that, where we've had some 60s and severe weather here already in Indiana in November, and we've had to, it was 25 a couple of mornings ago. So we've had the really cold and we've had the really warm as well. I think you're going to see some days like that as we go later on into the winter. So forecast risks then, what could go wrong? Well, what could bust this forecast? Well, first off, could the analogs be too warm? I think there's a risk that, with that warm PDO developing, that warm blob, it could be colder than what I'm forecasting here. And so that's why I mentioned that. But I want to go on the conservative side, all right? Does that southeast ridge flare up more than expected and not move those anomalies to the west? If it does, the eastern half of the country may be a little bit more toastier than what I'm forecasting here. So there's some warm risks there as well. And the other thing is, these pattern drivers that I'm talking about, INSO is pretty predictable. La Nina, it's here to stay until the winter's over. I'm pretty confident in that. And it's going to be east-based. I'm pretty confident in that too. The AO and the NAO, do they stay negative? You can't see that out more than a couple of weeks. Those pattern drivers are just hard to see more than a couple of weeks out. So I can say there are some guesses, and I have a feeling that we're going to see them go negative this year a lot more than we did last winter. I don't have the graphs pulled up here, but the QBO is in the negative, and it's trending in the negative. When the QBO is trending in the negative, that is whenever you see an enhanced risk of the NAO and the AO both going in the negative. We've got that working in our favor that we didn't have. It was firmly in the positive last year, and it was not trending in the negative. It was trending positive. So because of that, I certainly think that you have some risks that could give us a colder than normal winter. But by and large, folks, the big takeaway from this, it's going to be colder than last winter. Last winter, most of us didn't have a winter. This year is going to be much different, and you're going to feel it. Whether you get a bunch of snow or whether you only get a little bit of snow, it's certainly going to be colder. And I think a number of you are going to have a lot more snow than what you saw last winter. I will have an update to this forecast in January. I'll have a little bit of a midwinter update then. So in the meantime, leave a comment below here on YouTube in the video. I'll answer them as quickly as I am able. I'm meteorologist Michael Wilhite with SouthernIndianaWeather.com. If you want to, by the way, you can go out to the blog, and a blog post will accompany this as well. Just go to SouthernIndianaWeather.com, and then I've got a winter section, and you'll see final winter forecast there. You can sort of read some things that may not be mentioned in this video as well. Thanks for watching, folks. And again, be sure to subscribe for some long-range updates as we go throughout the winter and the midwinter forecast coming in January.